So, hello everyone again. I hope that you are having a great Wednesday morning. My name is Michelle Harpenow. I'm the Executive Director with the World Affairs Council, and I want to welcome you to our session talking local solutions to global challenges, creating a green Cincinnati. Excuse me. This event is part of Your Future in the World Summit, sponsored by Northern Kentucky University and Miami University. So I just want to tell you a little bit about the World Affairs Council in case you're new to this organization. So the World Affairs Council has been around since 1923. We are coming up here on almost 100 years. And the organization itself's main focus is around international understanding and cultural awareness. We do this through three main focus areas, one being educating our students about the world. We also work directly with the U.S. Department of State to increase our peer-to-peer diplomacy efforts for the U.S. and to build those relationships around the world. And of course, we also want to help inform our community about what's going on. So we want to bring issues that matter to our community. So it's very exciting to have this topic here because this is one of the issues that matters to our students. Students took a survey recently and said climate change was actually #1. But of course, how can you impact climate change? And one of the big things we wanted to focus on was how can we do that within our own community? So that's one of the big reasons we're here today, and we have some really great speakers for you. So in August, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released an alarming report on the current status of the environment and the impact that it will have on humanity. Around the world, youth have become outspoken advocates in demanding that governments, businesses, and nonprofit organizations make changes to ensure the sustainability of the planet. In this session, you will be inspired to think globally and act locally. We will discuss the Green Cincinnati Plan, a bold vision to put Cincinnati on a path to 100% renewable energy and advance the sustainability, equity, and resilience of our city. You will hear how to take direct action to create a greener Cincinnati, including programs that are open to high school students. Be inspired to advocate for climate issues affecting your own community and learn more about opportunities to assist in the work that local leaders are doing to create a more sustainable future. So at this point, I am going to go ahead and introduce you to two of our panelists today. We will hear from Oliver Kroner, Sustainability Manager for the City of Cincinnati, followed by Kelsey Hawkins-Johnson, Community Outreach Coordinator at Groundwork Ohio River Valley. So to briefly introduce Oliver works with the city government and community members to identify and implement strategies to prepare the city for the future. He is responsible for advancing and tracking the sustainability and resiliency recommendations of the Green Cincinnati Plan, including greenhouse gas modeling. Prior to this role, he worked as an environmental scientist with the University of Cincinnati's Risk Science Center, modeling the human health impacts of chemicals in the environment. And he is also a graduate of Miami University and Northeastern University and a proud AmeriCorps alumni. Thank you so much, Oliver, for being with us, and I'll go ahead and pass it to you.
Great, thank you. Pull up these slides. Can I get a thumbs up from somebody? Make sure that those are showing.
Looks good.
Thank you, appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. I tip my hat to you for starting so early. When I agreed to this, I did not realize that I would be up so late last night watching election results. But here we are, excited to be with you. As was said, I work for the City of Cincinnati's Office of Environment and Sustainability. Our office focuses on climate change, how climate change will impact government, how it will impact quality of life for residents, and what we're going to do about it. So given that this is one of your top concerns, I assume this is the topic that you have studied and read about. And normally, if we were in person, we'd have a conversation about what's causing this problem. But big picture here, our lives have become dependent upon material resources and energy production that have byproducts, right? Fossil fuels primarily. We are burning organic material that's in the earth to turn it into energy, to turn it into plastics. We're degrading Earth's natural systems to store that carbon, and we're emitting it into the atmosphere. And now we have the highest rates of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere in human history. And you see some of the consequences in the news around the world, right? You probably hear and see about sea level rise on the coasts, severe storms coming through Florida, the Caribbean, doing pretty significant damage. Severe drought in some locations where you go for months with no rainfall. And right now, forest fires are top of mind as they burn through the US. But that is different than what climate change looks like locally. Here, we are seeing some of the same trends, but different consequences. So we're absolutely seeing heat. It's getting warmer. Year over year, it's getting warmer. It's getting warmer in the summer in the form of heat events where we have very high heat that can have pretty significant health consequences for elderly people or people with respiratory issues. But it's also getting warmer in the winter, more warmer in the winter. And that begins to affect the freeze-thaw cycle in ways that affects the ecosystem and when plants flower and when pests reproduce or die off seasonally. And it's getting wetter. The climatologists study storm events and they measure them as their likelihood of occurring within a certain time frame. So one of the big storm events is called a 100-year storm. That means a storm that's statistically supposed to happen once every 100 years. Well, in the last 15, we've had 10 of those here in Cincinnati. And these are particularly problematic for two major reasons. One, as you know, we are a very hilly city. So when we get all of this rain, it rushes down the hillsides and can create flash flooding. Those hills also can become saturated with rain and begin to slip when there's too much water. In this image here, it's Columbia Parkway, you might be familiar, where the hillside slipped into this major thoroughfare. We're now spending $17 million to try to stabilize that hillside to allow this road to continue to be usable. But the other major problem is that we have a very old sewer system. So when we have these hyper-localized major storm bursts, the sewers just can't handle it. And we have what's called a combined sewer system where we have stormwater that mixes with raw sewage when the system's overwhelmed. And that means that all of that raw sewage can be flushed out into waterways, sometimes into creeks that run through backyards, but also up into people's basements, which is a pretty significant, pretty foul problem. And between the floods, the landslides, the sewer backups, our government has now spent over $130 million since 2004 dealing with these storms. And those are dollars that would be spent in other more practical ways if the dollars were available. So this hillside cost $17 million. That's money that was intended to be spent on the new police headquarters. So you can see here, we are forced to prioritize the climate crisis over some basic public services. So what are we doing about it? Since 2008, Cincinnati has had a Green Cincinnati Plan. In fact, Cincinnati was one of the first cities in the US to have a climate action plan. It was the first time we modeled our carbon emissions as a city to tell where they're coming from and set targets to reduce them by 2050. So the plan's been updated every 5 years, most recently in 2018. And it is basically a collection of strategies to build a more sustainable, equitable, resilient city and reduce carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, 80% by the year 2050. I'll talk for a minute about how this plan was created. So the mayor introduced the motion to update the Green Cincinnati Plan and appointed a steering committee of figureheads from around the community. You can think of big business leaders, church leaders, community and nonprofit leaders, faith leaders, to guide the process. And then we had over 30 public meetings and community centers and around the city to collect public input. And all in all, the public submitted over 1,400 recommendations for us to consider. It's a lot of work. We did our best to synthesize similar ideas, and we partnered with the University of Cincinnati to analyze the climate impact of each of the recommendations. And we partnered with Xavier University to analyze the cost benefit of each of the recommendations. And ultimately, we put forward 80 strategies to reduce carbon 80% by 2050 in these various focus areas. This plan was adopted by Council in 2018 and provides the core playbook for our office's work. So there are 80 strategies here, but I'm only going to talk about a few of the big ones. Before I do that, so let me ask you, in order to reduce our carbon, we have to know where our carbon comes from. So take a second and ask, in Cincinnati, where does our carbon come from? Where do you think our emissions primarily come from? I hope you have an answer in your head. Now you can see if you're right. So when we measure where Cincinnati's carbon comes from, all in all, it's 7.6 million tons of carbon dioxide. But it comes from transportation. I bet some of you said cars or transportation, about a third. And then if you combine our homes, our industrial buildings, and our commercial buildings together, that's 60% of our carbon. So cars plus buildings is 90% of our carbon emissions. So that gives us a pretty good idea of where our core strategies need to be. So when we think big picture about the most effective strategies, one, we know we need to transition to 100% renewable electricity, renewable energy. Two, we have a very old building stock. We know we need to improve the energy efficiency of our buildings here. Three, we know we are very reliant on single passenger vehicles, cars. We need to encourage residents to get out of cars, onto bikes, walk to work, or take public transit. And four, we need to electrify. So if we're using fossil fuels, we will never reach our carbon emissions reductions. However, if we can electrify cars, we can then power them with 100% renewable electricity. If we can electrify buildings, we can do the same. So some broad themes to keep in mind. On energy, we are doing everything we can to pump Cincinnati full of renewable electricity. If you recognize this picture on the right, this is the Zoo's solar farm, which is currently the largest solar installation in the area at 1.8 megawatts. But we are currently under construction for a project that is 100 megawatts. So that's 1,000 acres of solar that will, on a sunny day, power government with entirely renewable electricity, but also feed the equivalent of 25,000 homes worth of energy into the community of Cincinnati. And what's amazing about this is that we are able to build this at a cost savings to Cincinnati. So we're at a point where renewable electricity is out competing on a price basis coal and nuclear energy. Last year, the city passed a momentous tax levy, which expands the funding for the bus system to a county-wide sales tax that will raise $100 to $150 million annually to improve the bus system. You know, for decades now, the bus has seen a decline in ridership and therefore a decline in box fare, decline in budget. With new dollars, there will be new routes, more frequent stops along those routes. We're exploring what is called bus rapid transit, which is basically a super service from outside the city into the urban core to help people commute faster. We're looking at electrifying the bus system and then some basic amenities like a Wi-Fi on the buses. We're hoping that this will increase bus ridership about 20% from where it was pre-pandemic. And then we're electrifying vehicles. So when we ask the people of Cincinnati why they're not driving an electric vehicle already, very few are saying, oh, they're too expensive. Most are saying, I don't know where I'd charge it. That's called range anxiety. If you're going to drive from here to your family in Columbus or something like that, what happens if you run out of juice? So we are working to make charging stations more prominent and more visible. So we have about 160 chargers around the city, but maybe you have never seen one. So we're trying to make them more visible, give people visual reminders that these are available. We also have a free EV parking program. So if you drive an electric vehicle, an EV, you can come to our office and register it, and we'll give you a sticker to put in your window that lets you park at any city meter, totally free. Pretty big incentive if you work, live, or play downtown. And then we're investing in electric and hybrid electric vehicles for our own fleet. So that looks like hybrid electric police vehicles and 20 all-electric sedans for our city's code enforcement program. It turns out that when you don't have to fuel and you don't need oil changes, these are much lower cost to operate. So we have now passed the plan to move our 2,000 cars to entirely electric as the technology is available. But it's not all technology per se. You know, we're also measuring what the climate crisis looks like on the ground and looking at green infrastructure solutions. So last year, 2020, we did a citizen science heat map where we had volunteers connect heat sensors to their cars, and we collected over 10,000 data points around the city. And you can see here the darker red, higher temperatures during the summer day compared to the lower blue, cooler temperatures. And you can see that people who live in these corridors experience almost 10 degrees higher heat during these heat events. And that's a public health threat. So then we can ask ourselves, well, what can be done about it? And when we compare the heat map to a map of our tree canopy, we can see there are pockets of red that really don't have very many trees. So we can target our tree planting in areas where there is more pavement or more built environment and less green infrastructure to try to address this problem for our citizens. That's a very small collection out of the 80 strategies we're working on. However, I would like to report to you that when we measure our carbon, these strategies are working. Compared to the first time we measured in 2006, we set this target, the orange line, to reach long-term reductions of 80% by 2050. And when we have measured in the interim, we are ahead of that trajectory line. So we've been able to achieve almost a 40% reduction in carbon emissions since 2006. The challenge now is to maintain that momentum and take us all the way to carbon neutrality in the long term. I'll close with a quote for you, one of my favorites. The greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it. And I think Kelsey will talk a little bit more about how you can plug in. So that whole plan is available at greencincinnatiplan.org. And after Kelsey shares, then I look forward to talking more and taking questions.
Thank you so much, Oliver. Those are really great insights. 80 strategies that we have going on, but also very condensed to share just very high level. So I really appreciate that. And I hope everyone will check out that Cincinnati plan. It's doing some really great things for our community. Let's go ahead and let me introduce Kelsey Hawkins-Johnson, our other speaker. So Kelsey serves as the Community Outreach Coordinator at Groundwork, Ohio River Valley. Prior to Groundwork, she worked at the City of Cincinnati Office of Environment and Sustainability. As a Sustainability Fellow through Public Allies Cincinnati, Kelsey combines her love of the natural world with writing and advocacy. She will be helping maintain partnerships, communications, and assisting the Climate Safe Neighborhoods program. In her free time, she enjoys hiking, spending time with family, reading, and baking. I noticed that both Kelsey and Oliver have that AmeriCorps Public Allies background. So I'm going to actually ask that question at the end so you guys can talk a little bit about that to the students, because that's a really great program. But Kelsey, I'll pass it to you. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you, Michelle, to talk about that as well at the end. But good morning, everybody. My name is Kelsey Hawkins-Johnson, and I'm the communicator with Groundwork Ohio River Valley. Environmental justice based in Lower Price Hill, and Groundwork is this in the environment. And so we work in underserved communities in the greater Cincinnati region, and we reach people left behind by the environmental movement. And so there's so part of the national network of Work USA, so there are other trusts we call, which are other groundwork nonprofits around the US, and there are 25 of them, and Groundwork Ohio River Valley is one of them. They do similar work, just like we do. And we also have a number of programs that seek to bring environmental justice to the greater Cincinnati region. Today, I'll be talking about two of those programs. One is our Green Team, and then the other is Climate Safe Neighborhoods. Next slide, please. So our Green Team program, this is a paid workforce for high school students between the ages of 14 and 18. The Green Team is an opportunity who wouldn't be interested in typical environmental education programs, and it's an opportunity to environmental activities like kayaking, hiking, and trail building, forest restoration, etc. For the youth that go to the Green Team, we know that some of them don't always choose environmental careers, but there's still an appreciation of the work that they've done and an understanding of environmental issues here in Cincinnati. Green Teamers, as we call them, they work on a variety of community projects in Cincinnati, and they mainly work in underserved communities. We have an Aiken Green Team as well this fall, as well as the South Fairmont Lick Run Green Team that I've been working with. And so some of the things that they've been doing within the community is, again, trail building. They pick up litter, they do forest restoration, urban agriculture projects. They also gain a lot of soft skills in green infrastructure, as well as natural resource management and recreation skills. We realize the importance of having fun in the outdoors as well. So it's not always just working and trail building and hard labor. We have taken a few camping as well as kayaking at the Ohio River Paddle Fest, which was earlier this summer. This summer, we've also had an increase in our Green Team. We went from 15 from like last year to over 70 this summer who worked at 30 sites. We also sent 9 of our Green Team to Yellowstone, where they met the Secretary of Interior, Deb Haaland from the US government. Next slide, please. Our Green Team has also worked with NASA as well, and they've been mapping flooding and heating vulnerability here in Cincinnati. So that's something that you don't always hear every day, that you work with NASA. So that's a great opportunity for them that they've got to encounter this summer as well. So yeah, that's a picture of our Green Team with Deb Haaland. And so I'm not going to play the video, but I will send it in the chat later on. This video is some of the Green Teamers from last summer talking about their experience of being a part of the Green Team and the difference that it made for them. We also have other YouTube videos as well that you can check out. You just look up Groundwork Ohio River Valley on YouTube, and you'll see a number of videos featuring our Green Team. Next slide, please. So now I'll be talking about our second program, which is Climate Safe Neighborhoods. And this program is a partnership that brings together 9 other cities in the nation. So this is our other trusts, Groundwork Trusts. They also have this program implemented into the organizations that we have with Climate Safe Neighborhoods is to explore and communicate the relationship between the climate crisis, racism, and segregated housing. It's built the capacity of residents to self-advocate for more equitable distribution of resources, as well as develop and implement short-term mitigation measures for extreme heat and flooding. Here is a 1925 map of zoning designation in minority neighborhoods of 1930. And so this map is an example of injustice in Cincinnati. To explore this deeper, the impact of climate change will not be felt equally. And so we see here the green dots, they're pretty like lime green looking. So that represents minority populations in Cincinnati. Then the blue is industrial and yellow is residential. And as you see, this was planned in the past to segregate people, minority populations, to have them closer to industrial factories, and it exposes them to air pollution and wastewater exposure as well. So yeah, some of the impacts of climate change is that, which is air pollution, urban heat as well is a part of that, and it impacts a lot of minority population. And then flooding, you see by the Ohio River, which is down below, that's where a lot of the minority populations are, that's where they're located. And so they have an increased risk of being affected by flooding. Next slide, please. And so in collaboration with the City of Cincinnati Office of Environment and Sustainability and Green Umbrella, we a Lower Price Hill equity group to center community engagement and planning, and focus on residents creating their own climate resilience plan. So in Lower Price Hill, we wrapped up our Lower Price Hill equity group just this year. And residents, they attended 6 meetings online, and they created a climate change plan, and they provided like neighborhood level expertise, and they shared a vision of their community to co-create recommendations for the Green Cincinnati Plan, as Ollie has mentioned. And so also just last week, as a part of the Lower Price Hill equity group, we had residents plant 28 trees in Lower Price Hill. This was a part of the plan that they created at the end of their time within the equity group, where they designated where certain trees in the neighborhood they wanted to have planted. And so that happened just last week, where we had community partners, residents, as well as our Lower Price Hill Green Team participate in planting 28 trees for the neighborhood. And the more trees that there are, that provide shade, reduce heat, and provide cooling for the neighborhood as well. And so this is the tree canopy that we're talking about here. And on the left hand, there's a map of Lower Price Hill, and you see there isn't a lot of trees there. And the trees is what's green, and the black is impervious surfaces, which causes flooding, and that's uneven pavement. And so, yeah, you see the impact of no trees, low canopy, and then the outcome of participating in an equity group where residents identified what they wanted for their community. It created more trees and more resilience against the climate crisis. So next slide, please. Now we're focusing on another neighborhood, which is Bond Hill and Roselawn. And so we're expanding. We started out on Price Hill. Now we're focusing on another neighborhood, and we're just gonna keep going and reaching these neighborhoods in Cincinnati who are most affected by the climate crisis, by heat, by flooding, who also are who have a high percentage of minority populations as well. And so we're focusing our efforts on Roselawn and Bond Hill, which is at the top here. And this is an example of tree canopy and impervious surfaces as well in Cincinnati. You see there's now a tree canopy, and then there's a low amount of impervious surfaces. But yeah, we're still going to tackle that and hear from residents what they would like changed within their neighborhood, and what they recommend for to combat this. So we have members right in ages of 14 and 68, and this is looking out to be like one of the best groups that we've worked with. Like last year was Lower Price Hill, and that was just a smaller group. But now this group, we have about almost 20 residents who are participating in this climate advisory group, which is what we're calling it now. Our goal with Climate Safe Neighborhoods is to expand this regionally. And we're working with partners like the City of Cincinnati Office of Environment and Sustainability with Ollie, who presented earlier, and then Green Umbrella. We also have a new partner, which is the University of Cincinnati, and they're just doing a little bit of research with our residents and seeing the impact of this program. We're also excited to be grant recipients of the Ohio Climate Justice Fund. This is where we'll be holding environmental justice community listening sessions. We got one planned in December after the last meeting with our Roselawn and Bond Hill Climate Advisory Group. And then we're planning on having 2 more in earlier 2022. And these sessions are for like city officials, community members to hear about clean energy, about climate impacts just in your neighborhood, and just voice your concerns about what's going on within your community. And we hope to implement this into the Green Cincinnati Plan. Just this week as well, on Friday, we have World Town Planning Day. And this is also in collaboration with Green Umbrella and the Planning Association. And this is to promote the role of planning and create a livable community for residents. And so we're going to have some members from our climate advisory group attend and collaborate to create a plan for Roselawn and Bond Hill. Next slide, please. So you heard about the Green Team, you heard about Climate Safe Neighborhoods. So how can you become involved with these 2 programs? So the first is to consider joining a local Green Team. We have some distributed throughout Cincinnati. Right now we have 4 right now for our fall Green Team in Aiken, South Fremont, Madisonville, and then Price Hill as well. So in the spring, we're planning on having some more Green Teams pop up. So if you want to become involved, I recommend checking out our website for updates for the spring applications, as well as our social media. If you have any questions about joining, you can send an email to info@groundworkohiorivervalley.org. Second is to attend the community listening sessions in December in 2022. And this is a part of our collaboration with the Ohio Climate Justice Fund. And this is an opportunity for you to hear from community members. This is an opportunity to hear from Roselawn and Bond Hill residents about their experience in the climate advisory group, hear from other youth who participated as well. We're planning to have our Lower Price Hill equity group have a community listening session in earlier 2022. So this is an opportunity to hear from residents in Cincinnati, as well as city officials and community partners on how to collectively create a plan for combating the climate crisis. Next is volunteer. There's some volunteer opportunities. We had some tree planting projects happen just like this last week in Northern Kentucky. We partnered with Mad Tree Brewing and Cincinnati Parks to plant trees. And so if you're looking to volunteer, you can contact Groundwork at info@groundwork.rivervalley.org and see how we can plug you in. And there's also other like volunteer opportunities with other organizations. And so we often collaborate with them as well. So just be on the lookout for that in the future by following us on Facebook and Instagram, as well as signing up for our newsletter if you have an email to learn more about what we're doing and what we've been up to. So thank you so much for, and I look forward to your question.
Thank you, Kelsey. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. So let's go ahead and kick us off with one of the questions. Of the impacts of climate change on Cincinnati, which do you feel is the most problematic?
I'll have a first go at that. So I'm going to answer it in two ways. When we're looking at the actual climate changes, increase in rain events will be our hardest to deal with. I saw a presentation from the state climatologists that said by 2050, we can expect to experience 60% of our rain to fall on 10 days out of the year. So we're basically getting really significant downpours that tend to fall in very specific parts of the city, the community. And it's hard to anticipate where, and it's hard to plan for that. And we're already in a position where our infrastructure was underprepared for modern day storms. So this is going to be challenging and expensive to deal with. Second part of the answer, I think, gets to some of the points that Kelsey was articulating. When we look at how these issues will impact residents, it becomes pretty clear pretty quickly that some residents are better prepared to deal with these challenges than others. And we have pockets of our community who are frankly very vulnerable to the crisis. And so when you look at public health, when you look at the economic impact, the people side, the social damages of climate change are pretty alarming, pretty scary. So a lot of the work that Groundwork is doing is really rallying around those vulnerabilities, rallying those communities, and saying, what can we do here and now to begin to prepare?
Yeah, I just agree with what Ali was saying, that we're working on the ground, like with residents, to incorporate them into create plan, because not everyone knows why some areas are being affected more than some. So, you know, those that live in Lower Price Hill are being impacted more than those that live in like Westwood or Forest Park, like those in more areas that have more greenery, who live in more suburban areas, who are more white as well. And so we touch on like racism. We have mapping like GIS that we do to really get into the issue. And we have like research that we do in history, and a lot of that also come from collaboration with like with NASA, with OES, with Green Umbrella, and so that really helps us to address this.
All right, so a few looks like social media and some class questions. So do you focus on how climate change affects animal habitats and the homeless of Cincinnati as well?
I think I would say that at this point, the climate crisis is moving faster than anticipated, and we are struggling to keep up. If you look at sort of the history of urban environmental work, it started off around environmental compliance, moved into environmental management, environmental quality, sustainability. Now it's moving more into resilience and equity. So, you know, sustainability really focused on decarbonizing. And I think we're now coming to a point, we're reading these reports from the National Climate Assessment that says, regardless of what we do around decarbonization, we are going to feel these impacts. And so we have to think more about resilience and equity. And that's all to say that, yes, we are concerned about the ecosystem, the homeless population, but we're not well equipped with solutions to take these on just yet. Actually, a partnership with Groundwork over the last year has been an analysis that we've called the climate equity indicators, which begins to try to estimate percentage of homeless within different communities, tree canopy within different communities, public health crisis within different communities. And we find that when we separate, disaggregate data to look at it neighborhood by neighborhood or census block by census block, we can begin to target programs and resources in a way that we haven't been able to do in the past when we're looking at everything at a city scale. So yes, but I don't think we're doing it well yet. We're still learning and developing the tools to get there.
So our audience lives, it looks like, a lot in Forest Park area. So just specific to like Forest Park, Green Hills, Springfield Township. Is it possible to get electric charging stations there? What is the process to get that started? And then another says Forest Park has a lot of greenery. So what are some ways we can take action to help?
Electric vehicles, absolutely. I'm understanding this correctly, that it's on school property, I believe. In which case, I think you should talk to your school about procurement practices. I don't know if you're able to just purchase charging stations or if you'd have to put out a request for proposals. That said, there are companies now that are actually willing to pay to put chargers in locations in exchange for the right to charge a price for charging the vehicle. So if you think of it sort of as like a gas station, but a charging station in the community. We have a number of companies that we work with here in Cincinnati, and I'd be happy to make any of those connections. But I think it would be helpful to know whether you can engage directly with those companies or if you have a procurement process that requires something formal and around an announcement of an opportunity. I'll also say that, you know, for most electric vehicles, you can just plug them into an outlet. They won't charge as fast, but you can just plug them into a 110 volt outlet. I have an electric vehicle and that's what I do. The charging stations have higher amperage, so they can pump more juice more quickly into the car. Then there's another part to that question, is what can we do if we are already heavily forested?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much to do. You know, as individuals, we can think about our diets, think about the carbon impact of the food we eat. We can look at where our energy comes from at our houses, at our schools. At this point in Ohio, you have the right to purchase renewable electricity anywhere you live. There's a site called Apples to Apples that will give you price breakdowns of different opportunities, and almost across the board, renewable energy will outcompete fossil fuel energy. So if you're not already buying renewable electricity on behalf of the school or at home, that would be an easy way to take a giant bite out of your carbon footprint. The work from home, telecommute stuff. I mean, if I work from home one day a week, I shave my carbon emissions 20%, my commuting carbon emissions 20%. How can that apply at an institutional level? The list goes on and on. Kelsey, you likely have some ideas too.
Yeah, I would say engage in tree planting projects. There's a lot, it's tree planting season now, and some volunteer opportunities have been around to assist in like planting trees in certain areas. Yeah, just on Monday, we had tree plant at Inwood Park. And so I would recommend look for ways to engage volunteering for those communities to have more like as well, and participating in community and decision-making processes, and just like staying involved, even though you have your neighborhood, your community. I think also paying attention and advocate for those who are ignored and who don't always have a voice, I think is one way you can help.
So I'm going to end with kind of a how did you get where you are question. So if you don't mind sharing what motivated you to pursue a career in environmental policy, and I'd love to hear you guys share a little bit about your AmeriCorps Public Allies experience too.
Yeah, my let's see, I started out in anthropology. I studied anthropology in my undergrad, and I've done environmental justice work. I've been engaging with the environment, like the natural world. Like it's something that I enjoy, like being a part of, and participate in outdoor activities. So my love for like activism and voices and injustices, it coincided with the climate crisis and addressing this from a standpoint of what's human relationship with the environment and why are there those who are oppressed more than others. And I've looked into like indigenous relationships with the environment. I looked into like just cultural relations around people are engaging with the environment the way that they are. And that led me to studying like climate, just answering a lot of the questions that I had, as well as infusing my activism. And so I've gotten more into environmental policy that way. And with Public Allies, I've to like become like a local around the environment and climate here in Cincinnati. I've lived in like Michigan and DC, but I'm originally from Cincinnati. And so I decided to join Public Allies, which is a 10-month AmeriCorps leadership program for those 18 and up. And I was placed at the Office of Environment and Sustainability with Ollie. And so I was there like a few months ago. Like I ended in June, and I've worked with under them with the Climate Neighborhoods program. And after that, I joined groundwork with Harvard River Valley, home work and justice. And it's sort of like full circle, like with starting off with research and anthropology and all that. And now that I noticed that COP26 is happening, and I participated in COP24 as a delegate for the Anthropological Association and as an undergrad. And so it really is coming like full circle with how I started and my journey, and I'm just going to keep going.
So I also grew up in Cincinnati, and when I graduated high school, I planned to go to Northeastern and study psychology, but I changed my mind and I moved to New Mexico and did a year of AmeriCorps in the national forests out there, and took the year to do some self-exploration, and I read a lot. And during that year decided, well, came to the realization, maybe it's a better way to say it, that the climate would be the most pressing, most complicated issue of humankind before us, and shifted gears and decided to study environmental policy. Went on to work for an NGO that does environmental modeling and pursued my master's of environmental science. And I guess I'm still in the same point where I find this challenge, sort of the ultimate intersection of psychology, behavior change, technology, policy, and politics, that creates this really complicated puzzle that I find enormously challenging and intriguing to work on.